Hello everybody, welcome to Chapter 4 of my book, A Practical Guide to Human Resources. My name is Jeff Stinson, I'm the author, and today I want to talk about how to make sure you pay your employees correctly. So there's some concepts I want to talk about. The first is, what is our goal? The second will be a concept of internal equity. Third will be external equity. The fourth will be employee equity, and then lastly some different ways you might pay your employees. So what is our goal? Well, obviously the goal of any compensation plan is to attract and retain employees. I believe you get what you pay for, and even in this environment, good employees cost more than employees that maybe are not quite so good. Second, once they're on board, you need to motivate them, and don't believe what you hear. Money does motivate, and that's not always in the case of base pay, and we'll talk more about that later. And lastly, every organization needs to control costs. We all have financial limits, and with a well-designed pay system, we can stay within those limits. So internal equity, I put a chart up here that I'd like you to look at, and the whole idea between internal equity is an employee's view that the outcomes equal the inputs. In other words, if I'm doing the same amount of work as somebody else, are my outcomes the same? Am I getting the same amount of money? If I'm doing more work than somebody else, am I getting more money? So this concept of internal equity is important, and every employee looks at this whether they call it by this term or not. So fair is fair. People should be paid according to their contribution to the organization. So how do we determine what job is worth more than another job? There are a number of different ways. The simplest way is a job ranking program. Here we simply rank jobs from 1 to 100, or however many jobs you might have in your organization, and the top job, of course, will always be the CEO, and then jobs will be ranked below that. Another type of internal worth, if you will, is a job classification system. This is where job descriptions are created in advance, and they're put into salary ranges based on the complexity, the education, and skill required to perform them. Lastly is what's called a point factor system, very similar to a job classification system, but points are assigned to jobs based again on skill, effort, education, etc. What is external equity? Well, external equity is making sure that once we know what the job is worth within the company, we need to find out what the job is worth in the marketplace. So this involves doing salary surveys. Salary surveys are a little bit tricky because there's some things you need to make sure you're doing correctly. First of all, you need to make sure you're surveying what are called quote-unquote key jobs. So when you do a salary survey, you're not going to survey every single job in the organization. Rather, you want to take those that are most important to the success of the organization and survey those. The second consideration is, what is a relevant labor market? Clearly it's not the entire world. So it has to be a market that's relevant to you, and that's often geographic as opposed to competitors. So for example, if I'm an aerospace company, I may not necessarily want to survey other aerospace companies if they're not in my general geographic area, because that's not where I'm recruiting people. Third is the appropriate organization. Again, a lot of this has to do with size. So if you're a small company, if you want to compare yourself to a large, gigantic company, well, then you're going to find your pay to be not nearly as good. Now, that doesn't mean you're not offering other things that would make an employee want to come work for you, but pay may not be it. And then lastly, are we going to survey the right information? You want to look at base pay? Do you want to look at benefits? Do you want to look at bonuses, other perks, and things of that nature? You need to decide all of this ahead of time before you start the salary survey process. And then last is employee equity, and this is a term which we know as pay for performance. We measured performance in the last chapter, in the last video that we did, but pay, in my view, should be based on two things: the performance level of the employee and their current salary and where they are relative to the market. So in other words, if an employee is paid higher, then your expectation is that their performance should be higher, and of course vice versa. So when you're distributing merit, what we call merit money, if you will, salary increases, you should consider, where are they in the salary structure? Are they low paid compared to their peers? Are they higher paid compared to their peers? And then what is their performance? So some different ways you might consider paying people. The first is what's called a standard rate. In other words, everybody gets the same thing. You often see this in union environments. I don't recommend it, but it is an option. A second type of pay is what's called step rate, and I've given you an example here on the slide, where in year 1 you receive so much per hour, in year 2 it goes up, year 3, year 4, etc. You often see this in public sector kinds of jobs. You also see this in union jobs. The third is what's called piecework, and that's where you're paid based on exactly what you produce. So the more widgets that you make, the more money that you make. The fourth is merit, and we talked about that already, where you pay based on performance, not on these other factors. But whatever you choose, there should be a strategic alignment between the vision and the mission and the culture of the company, and the reward system needs to support that in order to create the performance that you're looking for. So some final thoughts, and I put up here some key steps to formulating a compensation strategy. Keep in mind you get what you pay for, and I can't stress that enough. My book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Again, it's A Practical Guide to Human Resources by Jeff Stinson. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon for Chapter 5.